Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 43, recorded September 2020. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan, we learn their Trek story, and we try to figure out why this show matters to them, to us, and to all of you. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 43. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfiles. Spoiler warning, people. As we record this, we are in the middle of Star Trek Lower Decks, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the seriously sagacious, sometimes sanctimonious, but never sanguine M5 Multitronic unit. Greet our listeners, M5.
The M5 stands by.
Okay, M5, what messages do we have?
News displayed.
The Trek Profiles Podcast is an independent Star Trek podcast. If you'd like to support us, the best way you can do that is to subscribe via your preferred podcasting platform. And it's always nice to share and repost our episodes on your social media. That can help other Trek fans find us. In this one, there are some edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of this episode. They will come after the ending audio cards. Enjoy them, or not, as you choose. Let's do the Kobayashi Maru lightning round feedback from episode 41 with Salwa Mohammed Noor. If you were on the bridge of the Enterprise 1701D, would I find you at Ops or Con? Salwa selected Con, but the poll respondents were for Ops by 64 to 36%. Who would you rather meet, Lal or Ian? Both Salwa and all of you were in agreement that Lal would be the one to meet by a huge 85 to 15%. Which would you find more useful, the Tantalus field or an agonizer booth? Both Salwa and all of you were in favor of your own personal Tantalus field by a massive 86 to 14%. Long live the Empire, I guess. Would you rather visit Yonata or Gary 7's home planet? In another lopsided outcome, both Salwa and all of you picked Gary 7's home planet by 87 to 13%. And finally, which would be the worst place to be stuck in for all time, the Mirror Universe or the Mycelial Network? Once again, Salwa and the listeners were in agreement by selecting the Mycelial Network by 53 to 47%. One more thing, you fine people. We just finished reviewing Salwa's lightning round feedback, and I really loved having her on the show as a brand new Star Trek fan. And I plan on continuing that series and having on new fans whenever I can find them and they'll agree to come on. But one of the things I'd be interested in is if any of you out there have any particular questions or areas that you might think would be interesting to talk about with brand new fans. I would love to get your feedback on that, and you can get in touch with me in any of the usual ways. Thanks so much. That's it for messages, communiques, news, and weather. Let's move on. M5, run the intelligence profile for this week's guest, and let's start the show.
M5 acknowledges.
Her favorite character is Jadzia Dax. She loves any and all aliens played by Jeffrey Combs, but especially Shran. She loves the Andorians in general, but Voyager in particular. Her rewatch of Deep Space Nine is currently in effect. She presently hails from Sioux City, Iowa, North America, Earth, in Sector 001. It is meteorologist Katie Nickolaou. Welcome, Katie, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
I can tell how excited you are. It's infectious, especially for this early in the morning as we record this.
Oh, you know it.
Katie, are you a Star Trek fan?
Massive Star Trek fan.
And have you always been a Star Trek fan, or did you come to it later in life?
Later in life, although honestly, I'm still a youngin'. I'm only 23. And I came to it about maybe when I was 11 or 12. So it's about half my life, I'd say.
Okay, so what was that early introduction to Star Trek? How did that actually happen?
Yeah, so it was actually really interesting. I don't think I would have gotten into Star Trek if I was in any other situation. But at the time, I was in middle school. And as pretty much every listener can probably guess, middle school is awful. And you usually have bullies. And I just happened to get a particularly bad one. So I was suffering from really intense anxiety. And I got to the point where I didn't want to leave my house. And so walking around the house, not really doing much. And my dad is watching an episode of Star Trek late at night. I'd never seen, I'd heard Star Trek. I knew the Vulcan salute and everything. But I stopped and I was like, for some reason, I saw Captain Picard in this episode. And I thought, I want to know more about that. So I ended up staying up until I think it was 1 a.m.
Oh my goodness.
And we watched Gambit part 1 and 2. And I mean, that's late season TNG.
Yeah.
Most people don't ever start on that episode, but I was just captivated by the story of it. And I thought, I want to know more about these characters because this one looks weird. This one looks cool. I like that one's beard. And you can guess which character that was. And I just thought, you know what? I want to know more about this. And my dad said, oh, yeah, no, this is Star Trek. There's the original series, Next Generation, this. And I'm sitting here looking at this entire volume of Star Trek thinking, I got to know more about this. So I remember I printed out a sheet of all episodes of TNG and I used green, yellow, and pink highlighter.
Mm-hmm.
If I liked the episode, I put pink. If I was a little iffy on it, yellow. And then green was like, okay. And I just remember putting pink on all the episodes. And I still have that list. It's in my bookshelf because I watched every episode from then on, from the first season to the last. And then I just took off from that.
You need to take photos of that and send it to me, and I'll put it up on the show notes page at TrekProfiles.
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah. It's just this old, crumpled up, ripped piece of paper. And it just all the episodes. It was great.
No, people love that, especially my listeners. You know, all these little bits of like personal Trek history. I mean, people just love that. I'm just guessing based on your age that probably wasn't original broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
It was much later. So by the time you started watching Star Trek, there was a lot of Star Trek to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So you started watching TNG season 7 with Gambit. Did you stick with TNG and watch all of that? Or did you just start watching everything, every which way? How did you do it? How did you eat that elephant?
It was great because I watched it on BBC America and they tend to air Next Generation. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Star Trek The Next Generation implies that there was a previous Star Trek. And then I'm thinking, wait. And I'm going through the online episode list like, wait a second, there's Deep Space Nine, there's Voyager, there's Enterprise, there's this new thing called Star Trek 2009. What is this all? So I just thought, you know what? I'm going to go with what I have at my disposal. And I started with Next Generation. And then, of course, Netflix became a big thing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the original series.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, okay, which one comes next, Voyager or Deep Space Nine? And that was an actual Google search I had to do because, you know, those shows had ended. And then I finally got around to watching Enterprise. And I thought, okay, this is great. Wait a second, there's movies? So I ended up going back and watching the motion picture through 6. And then, of course, all the next gen movies. And JJ's movies came out. Then, of course, you know, Discovery comes out and I'm sitting here. I think I called my dad. I was like, Dad, I'm going to watch Star Trek as it airs. It's a whole new generation of Star Trek. I love this. And so when anyone ever asks, like, how do you feel about Discovery? How do you feel about Lower Decks? How do you feel about any of this? I have this stupid smile on my face. Like, I just love watching Star Trek as it happens.
It's an experience that you can't exactly capture when you're streaming. It's something that we talked about on the show before, which is like a lot of people want to bring up Best of Both Worlds, the big Borg cliffhanger, right?
Yes.
And there's those people who watched it in original broadcast and had to wait all summer to find out what happened, you know?
Oh.
And when you're in the world of streaming, you just hit next episode, skip intro, and boom, you're in it, you know?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And I talk about that too to my dad. I'm like, how did you guys survive? That's an entire summer of not knowing what the heck happened. That honestly, Best of Both Worlds, if I didn't have streaming, I would have lost my mind.
I think many of us did. Many of us did. But I do want to go back to one thing you said, just as a caution to our listeners, because I know I have a lot of international listeners, which is that BBC America as a channel has absolutely nothing to do with the BBC.
Yes.
It is literally nothing to do with the BBC. It is called BBC America, and it's a channel here in the United States that licenses the name and shows some British programming.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, Doctor Who and other shows that don't even air on BBC, but air on Channel 4 and other channels, but basically shows Star Trek during the day for some strange reason and at night.
Yeah. I think it's because of Patrick Stewart. Who knows?
I have no idea, but just I didn't want any of our fans over in the UK to think we actually get the BBC over here. I mean, you can, but it is not BBC America. It's a totally different thing. So are you a disciplined rewatcher when you like to put on Star Trek? Do you like to just go through whole seasons or whole shows, or do you just like dive in and out? Sort of how do you decide what to watch when you're in the mood for some Trek?
I am probably a mix of everything because I have a rewatch that I'm doing. But then I'll be thinking, it's Halloween. I want to watch Bride of Chaotica. Or I want a feel-good episode, so I'm not going to watch Threshold. Just the episodes, whenever you feel like it, you have one that comes to mind that maybe resonates with what you did that day. And you want to watch that. But for the most part, I just pick a season. I think, I'm going to watch through this and then intermix a couple of series or episodes all in one.
So as we record this, we're in the middle of Lower Decks season 1.
Yes.
Have you been watching Lower Decks?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh. I have not laughed that hard all through quarantine, pretty much. And I'm watching the episodes thinking, I relate to that character and that character and that character. And it's fun for me because you can probably tell by my voice, I'm an optimist. I'm happy and peppy. And I just love to see the colors and the vibrancy and the life of Lower Decks. And it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's honestly my life. So it's something that resonates with me really well.
But there's a lot of Star Trek in that, right? You have,
yeah.
as a point of contrast, right? Discovery, which is sort of very ponderous and has a lot of very serious issues, but as far as the things that it's tackling. And then you compare it to some like the original series where you got episodes like Cat's Paw and The Trouble with Tribbles and A Piece of the Action. And you sort of have this goofiness which has been in Star Trek from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's always sort of been in the warp and weft of the show. And then you get back to people like, this is not Star Trek. It's like, man, that is more Star Trek than a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing that I love about Lower Decks the most is that I see the first few episodes, it's mostly just Easter egg packed. And it's such a great callback. But now we're getting into the middle of the season and later in the season. And I'm thinking, they're starting to branch out on their own now. What are they going to do? Because they have so many ways to touch on topics like the original series did. It takes a serious topic and puts it in a sci-fi lens so you can actually have fun with it. And you can actually deep dive into it and do both of that at the same time. And that's something you can't do in the real world. Mm-hmm. So honestly, Lower Decks, it is my Star Trek, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. So as we sit here today, have you seen all the Star Trek?
I have seen every episode of Star Trek ever made at least twice.
Okay, so you're a completionist 2 times over.
Yes, and I'm going to do it again.
Hey, you're not going to hear any negative talk about that here. We're all in.
Not much to do out in Sioux City, Iowa, so I have the time.
Well, you can chase tornadoes though, in the proper
Very
season.
True.
We'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to go back to something that you'd mentioned, and I feel like we covered it a little too quickly, which is that you were at a low point in your life in middle school. And trust me, I know all about middle school. I'm the parent of a middle schooler.
Oh, you poor thing.
Yeah. Well, in COVID, it's kind of a different scenario,
Oh, yeah.
Actually, as we record this right now, he's in virtual school right upstairs,
Nice.
right above me. Right above me. He's on a Zoom call. But one of the things that I think is interesting, and I've heard this story on the show before, and I'll be interested to hear your take on it, is that when people are sometimes at a low point in their life, they find something in Star Trek that speaks to them. What particularly was it in, it could be in Gambit, the episode you talked about in particular, or in Star Trek in general, or TNG in particular, that really gave you comfort and solace at that point in your life?
At that point in my life, I didn't want to leave my house. I was borderline anorexic, not because, I had weight issues or anything. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to do anything. And basically became a part of our couch. When I saw Gambit, I saw not only space, but different spaceships and different locations. And I saw these people going out and exploring it. And I thought, maybe this is a way I can, branch out, see other things rather than just the TV. And that was the first hook. Then you see Picard dealing with being captured, basically in a torturous situation. And that's kind of how you feel when you're bullied. You don't really realize it because you're living in it. But if you look at it from an outside lens, you are basically a hostage to this anxiety and this worry. And to see other people trying to help him and get him out of that, in a very abstract way, it gave me comfort. After that, I started, feeling the comfort from that. And I started watching more of Star Trek, not just Next Generation, but original series and Voyager and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I think the part of Star Trek that helped me the most and still helps me to this day is the science, which most people don't think of when they think, Star Trek, it's a TV show. But it's actually really good science. It teaches you if something happens, look for the cause. If there could be multiple causes, gauge how likely that is. Mm-hmm. And one of the things with my anxiety was I got very tight in the chest. And of course, in health class, they teach you, tightness in chest, you could be having a heart attack, you could be having this. And your mind instantly goes to that place. It's completely irrational. But for some reason, your mind just thinks it is. And so when I'm watching Star Trek, I'm like, picking up on this scientific process, thinking, okay, well, listen, I'm 13. I'm not going to have a heart attack. At most, it's probably going to be a muscle spasm because you haven't moved in forever. And so I started to think about that way, and it actually stopped my anxiety because I was answering these questions that were just left to the void and causing me anxiety. I was thinking through them in a scientific way that I could justify it in real life and other people could justify it in the same way. So it just helped me to understand what was going on. Mm-hmm. And that let me explore beyond myself, beyond my house, beyond my town, and now into the world. Because I now chase tornadoes all across the US. I've traveled the globe, and that's something I never would have thought I would have even done, even 10 years ago.
Okay, so you are a little bit of a public figure, so I feel like we should talk about the evolution of that.
Yeah.
As a middle schooler, you were having this anxiety, is what I heard, and then watching Star Trek sort of exposed you to this wider theoretical world that's out there, or fictional universe of Star Trek, but it really seemed to have touched something within you that the world is an interesting place, and there was a lot of science in the show. So that really spoke to you. And so you really got mentally activated by a lot of that.
Exactly.
Would you sort of align your lifelong interest in science with that moment, with your awakening into Star Trek, or was it parallel with something else?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of like two lines crossing, because I always wanted to be a meteorologist. I always loved the weather. When I was little, I was such an extrovert, and I loved everything about it. And when middle school hit, I receded back into a shell, and I didn't want anyone to see me. I couldn't be in front of crowds. Even at band concerts, you're in a mob of clarinets, and you still don't feel comfortable. And so I look back on that and talk to my parents, or I talk to my friends and say, just 10 years ago, I wouldn't leave my house. And now I'm on air every morning for 2 hours during a news broadcast. And the reason why was I wanted to do the weather. I went into my shell. Star Trek came along and it opened me back up to that world. And I wasn't afraid to be on television. In fact, I wanted to be on television. I still want to even expand into acting because of Star Trek exploring that world for me and letting me know, you know what, I can do what I'm passionate about without worrying anymore. Why not try some new things too? And so ever since those lines crossed, they've just kind of been going along together.
We have to divert for a second because in my prep for this, and I do a little bit of gentle internet sleuthing. I apologize in advance for that, Katie. One of the things I came across was your Survivor audition tape.
Yes. If anyone wants to know who I am as a person, Katie Nickolaou Survivor audition. That's all you need to know.
We'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes up at TrekProfiles, but Is that part of this exploration that you're talking about and sort of getting out into the world?
It is. Yeah. I've always wanted to go and see different climates. And honestly, it's the best way to see different planets compared to what you see in Star Trek is to go to different spots in the world. You can be in the desert in Arizona, head to the rainforest, and then go up to Lake Michigan. There's just so many different things to see on our own world. And I figure, you know what? Why not be on television while going and exploring and maybe winning $1 million? That seems like a pretty good gig. And I'd watched the show since I was little and just thought, you know what? I like watching it. Maybe I could live it. So fingers crossed.
Oh, so you haven't heard back yet?
Not yet.
Oh, wow. Okay. But
I imagine with COVID, it's all messy.
Yeah. But when you do hear back, I'm sure it'll all be NDA'd 7 ways from Sunday. So
yeah. Oh, honestly. Yeah.
You were very interested in science, right? You always wanted to be a meteorologist. And so the whole concept of Star Trek and sort of being, I don't want to say a science show, but having a lot of science infused in the show and sort of a sensibility of science really in a lot of ways really spoke to you. And so you went off to college, you studied meteorology, you became a meteorologist, but then you started doing like these stealth Star Trek cosplays, as I would best describe them.
Oh, yeah.
People who were just watching your newscast wouldn't even know sometimes that you were doing a Star Trek cosplay. But those of us who were sort of in the fandom would be like, oh my God,
yeah,
that's a Q outfit.
Exactly. Oh, that was the best day because of course, you got Star Trek and all that stuff. You got Star Trek Day. I just thought, you know what, I'll wear a red vest. And I thought, I'll wear a black dress too. And then I'll accessorize with just my regular jewelry that I have. And then I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and thought, good God, I'm Q. So I thought, I'm just going to post it and see if anyone thinks. And sure enough, people were like, you look like Q in his court robes. I'm like, this is amazing. I love all of you viewers. But yeah, so I'm thinking to myself now, okay, well, I can get this dress because it looks like the science uniform tunic that they wear in the first season of TNG, and I can do this and that, and maybe get a little necklace that has the Delta shield on it. Who knows? No one will know except for us.
So it's sort of these little Easter eggs that are in your weather broadcasts.
Oh, I try. And sometimes if it's like a nerdy holiday or if there's a new episode, or I'll make full-on weather graphics to show the weather in a Star Trek form. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the next Star Trek Day or the season premiere or series premiere of a new episode or something. So yeah.
I've also done this. I work for a very large Fortune 500 firm, and I have to do a lot of like very sort of stale sort of stuff sometimes, like training documents and materials. And I always infuse, even if it's like 7 layers deep, some sort of Star Trek reference into anything. So like I'll even do stuff like, let's imagine a case with 2 clients, Avery and Catherine, or things like that. And, like you would just blaze right through that, right? But you're like, wait a minute, what?
If
like, if you sort of see these things again and again, like people who don't know, they don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It'll just totally go by. But you have to, yeah. So if I'm ever forced to do a hostage tape, there'll be some oblique Star Trek reference in there, and whether it's a good reference or a bad reference, that's how you'll know how things are going.
Oh my gosh, I love that. See, I also, besides, the costumes and, outfits that I wear. Wink, wink, so my news director doesn't catch on.
Right.
No, but besides that, I actually have a little mini Spock, like a little action figure, on top of my handmade TARDIS from Doctor Who jewelry box. So when you watch the weather, not even during my show, but during the actual news at 5 p.m. or the weekend news, you can actually see in the background, just a sliver of it, little Spock standing on top of the TARDIS. And I can't hold myself together when I watch it because I see my chief meteorologist, I see my weekend meteorologist, and I'm like, you guys have no idea what either of those represent, do you? And no one's caught on yet. It's like a little Easter egg in every newscast.
Well, you have to send me the best quality pictures you have of that stuff, because I can grab some of those cosplays off your Twitter, but I'm sure that you have much better quality photos.
Totally.
So if you want to share those with me, I will happily put all of that, including pictures of Mini Spock standing on the TARDIS, up on the show notes page. I think listeners would definitely enjoy that. Let's talk a little bit about how you're consuming Star Trek these days. When you're watching the episodes, do you watch them on a big screen or watching them on a device, or what are you doing?
Well, it depends on the day, because if I have a lot to do and like I'm doing housework or I'm cooking a lot, I'm going to be watching it on my phone so I can just drag it around everywhere I go, just on Netflix or on CBS All Access. But if I'm just hunkered down, it's a blizzard, I got my sweater on, I'm sitting on my couch with my nice TV and just watching it and watching it and watching it. I am firmly in place for the next 6 hours at least.
Are you totally streaming, or are you watching anything on plastic discs?
I actually have, and this is kind of funny, of all the series, I have Enterprise on DVD. I loved Enterprise so much, I thought, I want to own this just in case the internet goes down. I want something. So I got all of the seasons of Enterprise, and whenever I go to watch that series, I go to the DVDs. I don't mind busting those out.
So that's part of your like weather emergency kit, right?
Literally, yes. I have all of my DVDs, battery powered little handhelds.
That's fantastic. So you've been doing these stealth cosplays in your work as a television meteorologist, but have you ever done like a full-on Star Trek uniform?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The year that I found out what Star Trek was, after watching Gambit, I got online and I ordered a Next Generation uniform, and I wore that for Halloween. It is still in my closet. But I got that one. I've gotten a medical uniform for TNG as well, just, the Starfleet blue, because you have to. I'm a scientist, But I'm also hoping to do more Star Trek cosplays. My first convention I went to, I only had a Kirk shirt, and it was 3 times too big for me. It was like from a cereal box. I thought, what can I do with this?
Like a uniform shirt or like a shirt with Captain Kirk on it? Like
a uniform shirt. And I thought, it's not a cosplay and it looks like massive on me. I do have an inflatable dinosaur, though, and it would fit it perfectly. So I took the shirt, put it on one of those giant inflatable T-Rexes, and wandered around with a phaser in my hand. And all the Klingons wanted to fight me. Denise Crosby might have been a little tipsy when I went to the panel, because it was all the TNG people. And you just hear in the background, because my dad recorded it, you just hear, "Oh my Lord, it's a dinosaur!" And that was my first introduction to real cosplay. And I thought, I'm going to take it official. So now I have my uniform. I want to do a trill because I love Jadzia Dax. And so I'm going to have to get the spots all done. And I have plans.
Oh, yeah, that can be done very easily. Yeah, the trill spots are a pretty easy thing. I mean, if you want to look like a Uridian or something, that's like a full-on project. But doing trill spots ain't no thing. You can find YouTube videos on how to put those spots on very quickly. So that's a fairly easy one.
Exactly.
So take me back. When was that first convention? How old were you? And what was the experience like?
That first convention, I was in college. And I live in Michigan. Well, I grew up in Michigan. I went to school in Indiana. And Chicago, of course, was the natural mecca for all social activities on the weekend. And it was only about an hour drive away. And I started joining Star Trek Facebook groups, of course. And one of them said, "Oh, hey, there's a convention in Chicago." And I thought to myself, I don't know what a convention is. Little old me, innocent old me. And so I thought, I'll ask Dad if he ever went to one of these. He said, no, but you get to meet the actors. And instantly I was like, we're going. And so I bought us 2 tickets. I think it was my sophomore year of college. So I was probably, 19? And I said, Dad, we're going together because you got me into Star Trek. We're doing this together. And we went to the 2016 convention in Chicago. And it just so happened that Shatner was there, along with pretty much everyone from TNG, a couple of Deep Space Niners, Voyager. And we walk in the front door, and we had no clue what a convention was. And so we walk in, and we just see Klingons and children dressed up as Data and Lore. That was the best cosplay, by the way. Twin brothers, Data and Lore. Oh my gosh, we freaked. But we walk in, and you're just seeing like Jonathan Frakes and John Delancey, and they're just out in the open. And my dad and I are just sitting here like, what is this? And it's just this tiny little sect of Star Trek nerds in this little hotel near O'Hare Airport. And we spent the entire day there from, I think it was 9 in the morning to 7 at night. And I had class. I ditched school to go to this. And
as one does.
Oh, absolutely. We loved it so much, we actually ended up going to a larger convention in 2019 and then 2020 before all of the COVID happened. And that was C2E2, the Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, which is, it takes that little Star Trek convention in a hotel. I think it was a Holiday Inn Express or something. You blow that up to a 3-story convention center at McCormick Place. My gosh, we were totally not prepared. And so we only went for one day. And of course, he helps me with my cosplays and it's just the best. And we thought, we're doing this right next year. We're going for 3 days. So it was me and him, my mom, who is not into nerdy things, my brother, who just kind of looks at all this like, holy cow, you are very passionate, aren't you? And my best friend. And we all spent 3 days at a convention, and it was amazing. Anyone who's listening who hasn't been to a convention, when they start back up, go. It is the most accepting group of people you will ever meet in your life.
Oh, for sure. What was the biggest highlight for you of going to that convention?
I won a date with Chase Masterson.
Okay, so you'd have to say more about that.
See, that comes along with the whole, I didn't know what a convention was, had never been. We got there at the start of the day, and we walked into the convention hall, the main hall, and Chase Masterson was up there, who, of course, plays Lita in Deep Space Nine, the Dabo girl. And she was up on stage, and they said, we need volunteers. Come on, anyone, everyone, who wants to do this? And I literally, verbally thought in my head, what could possibly go wrong? And raised my hand. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, come on up. And we hadn't even found seats. And so I'm just walking up the aisle and they're like, we're accepting of everyone, come on, all kinds of life. And I'm like, what is happening? And then they're like, yeah, here, come here. And I just see it's all guys. And then it's myself and another woman. And I'm like, what's going on? And they say, all right, everyone, welcome to the Star Trek dating game. You're going to compete to win a date with Chase Masterson. And I thought, as a straight woman, I was like, frick, how do I do this? I'm like, I feel like a fraud. And so I'm like 7th in this line of 8 people. And you go up, Chase has her back to everyone, and she asks you a couple of questions. It was like the secret dating game.
Right.
And so all these guys are going up in front of me.
Were they Star Trek questions or general questions?
General and Star Trek. So it was like, if you were in the Star Trek world, if we were on Deep Space Nine, where would you take me to go get a drink or something like that?
The Replomat is definitely the wrong answer.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, you got to go to a chic spot, one of the little stands of the promenade.
Absolutely. The Andorian fast food shack,
Exactly.
Someplace like that.
See, there are exactly correct answers. And to Chase's credit, she knew what ones there were.
Right on.
So I'm panicking at this point because I'm running out of guys to go up to ask the questions. And so I go up and she goes, hi, who's this? And I'm like, hi, I'm Katie. And she goes, hi, Katie. All right, so what is it that you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a science officer. And I start getting into the role play mode, which was really fun. I'd never role played in my life. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is like Dungeons and Dragons kind of, we're in the Star Trek world.
Sure.
And so she was like, all right, can you give me your best Dabo? I was like, oh, this is really happening. And so I'm just up on stage in front of thousands of people just going, Dabo! And, yell like that. And she was like, so what are you looking for in a date? And I said, that's a good question because I'm not looking so much for a date as I am a wing woman to go out on the town. Maybe we can go to Bajor, pick up a couple of Dr. Bashirs, And I'm just like, at this point, looking at my dad, like, you better be recording this. This is gold.
Yeah, you need to send me that recording and we'll put that up.
Yeah, he didn't record it.
Oh my
goodness.
goodness.
The button didn't work. It only lives in our 2 memories. We did that. And then I get off to the side of the stage like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And then Chase at the end goes, okay, so you are all so nice, but I think I'm going to have to go with Bachelorette. And I'm like, okay, well, it's either me or this other girl. Number 6, Katie. I'm like, how on earth? And I'm looking at this line of people. The heck? And I go up on stage, and I will never forget this. She comes up and she goes up for a hug, and I give her a hug, and she just whispers in my ear, away from the mic. No one else heard this. She goes, let's go get us a couple of Bashirs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love you. And so it was so much fun. And, you don't actually go out on a date, sort of thing. But I did get a gift card, and I got a Star Trek shirt, which I'm actually conveniently wearing right now.
Well, we both are wearing Star Trek shirts.
Yes.
I got my UFP shirt on right here.
You know that we're fans.
There you go.
When we have the shirts.
There you go. I always try to wear a shirt, too, when I'm recording the podcast. And
there you go.
There's no video of this or images. Yeah. So this is just for my guests to help them get in the right frame of mind.
They can imagine what design I have on my shirt, but it says Star Trek.
It is absolutely Star Trek. So one thing I want to encourage you to do, Katie, is when things get somewhat back to normal, you got to come out to the Vegas convention. You will absolutely love it.
Oh my gosh.
You will lose your mind.
See, I am totally, everyone I meet thinks, you would hate Vegas, Katie. You weren't big into crowds. You're an extrovert, but I love Vegas. I went there for a broadcast convention.
NABBEA.
Mm-hmm. And it was at the Westgate.
Yes.
And that's where the Star Trek ride was.
Yes.
And so I went hunting for any remnants, and I saw that they had a gift shop where the main entrance used to be, and they still have like the holodeck frame doors.
Yep.
I freaked out. So I just thought, you know what, maybe there's more to Star Trek in Vegas. And I see there's a convention I have wanted to go since I found out, like 5 years ago. You know what? Once COVID is done, I was going to go this year.
Yeah.
I had vacation time set up. Nope, it's fine. It's fine.
Yep.
But yes, eventually it's going to happen.
You will love it. It's a little hard to know what it's going to be like because it used to be at the Rio.
Yeah.
Which was nice because the Rio was physically separate from the other side of the strip. It's on the other side of the highway.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of isolated. Whereas when you're on the strip side, it's like one hotel right after the other. It's looking like it's going to be moving. We're not exactly sure in the future what it's going to be like, but it was 6,000 people and it was all Star Trek, wall to wall for like 4 to 5 days. like more than you could possibly handle. And what's wild is when you run into Ethan Phillips in the elevator and, you know, you run into just whoever, you know, and it's just crazy. And every single person is just as much into Star Trek as you are, you know?
Exactly.
And so it's like this insane gathering of the tribes.
Yes.
Where you just, you know, you're all together and you are so knee deep into it, you know, and there is no Star Trek thing which is too obscure. Like some person is going to get it, you know, and people would do these like very understated cosplays that someone else would get.
Oh, yeah.
It's a magical thing. And I was really missing it this year. I really felt it, you know, especially because being part of the community as I am, I know so many of these wonderful fans and many of them have been on my show and I only get to see them at the convention face to face. And so I really missed that. It really was a downer for me. So I can't wait for things to get back to normal, but you got to come and I'll definitely buy you an Altair water or whatever it normally is. You know, that's what you get for being on the show. It's the least I can do.
I love it.
So we've talked about conventions. Are you a collector at all?
I am a very small scale collector, though. I have a reprint of yesterday's Enterprise script because, you know, I thought being on television, acting might be an option. So I thought if I want to read through a script, it's going to be yesterday's Enterprise.
Oh, of course.
And so I'm starting to maybe collect a couple of scripts. I also have a bunch of autographs that I love to collect. It's a thing that my grandma used to do actually back in the 50s and the 40s. So she used to write out and send out to get autographs from all these famous people. She even has one from Ronald Reagan.
Wow.
And we came across it right after she passed away, and this binder full of autographs. I'm like,
oh, that's cool.
I didn't know you could do this. And so I started out, you know, sending out autograph requests. And then I found out conventions exist and you can actually get that signed in front of them. So I've gone up, I've seen Shatner. I have a Connor Trinneer autograph. Oh, I have a book. It's not with me, but it's a tornado weather book. And it's a Reading Rainbow book. And I took it up to LeVar Burton and I said, I'm a meteorologist. I chase tornadoes. This book got me into the weather. And Star Trek has helped me to get into my career. Would you mind signing this? And so he autographed my tornado book. And we joked that because, you know, LeVar, it has a V in it. He signs his name so that the V looks like a tornado. And it was just the coolest experience of my life. So I've really gotten into collecting autographs just because you can collect the experience as well.
Is that your favorite autograph that you've collected?
Oh, hands down. Hands down.
What's the biggest get for you that you don't have as far as an autograph?
Oh, Scott Bakula. That man. I love Scott Bakula. Whether it was Quantum Leap, Star Trek, NCIS New Orleans, anything he's done, I want to get his autograph. And I want to just tell him thank you because he seems like such a genuinely nice person.
Absolutely.
That's the whole thing for me is like wanting to go get these autographs. Yeah, sure, I want the autograph, but I also want to be able to tell them, thank you so much for helping me with my life and just being you. So it's a two-parter.
Now, what would you have Scott sign?
Oh my gosh, that is a good question. Probably because I'm very crafty, so I like to do paintings.
Okay.
I think I would probably do like a mashup of all of his characters. So you have Sam Beckett, you have Captain Archer, you have all of his characters that he's done. And I'd do a minimalist painting style. I would put them all together and I would have him sign it and I would put it up on my wall.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because I'm a nerd.
Have you done any Star Trek paintings?
I did one. It turned out okay. It was a Vulcan with the original Enterprise, you know, just floating in orbit. And I poked holes in it and stuck some fiber optic cable through and attached a light to it. So all the stars were like glistening and twinkling.
Nice.
But that took me probably 2 weeks because I kept messing up and getting frustrated. Like the nacelle isn't right. So I've been staying away from the nitty gritty part, but I might get back into it. You know, you have all the time in the world with COVID.
Yeah, that's right. You're stuck at home. You might as well. Yeah. If you want to send me a picture of that, I'll post that one as well.
Oh, totally.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about your fandom. We've talked about the episodes that you've seen and how you consume Star Trek, your collections, conventions, cosplay, all that. I think it's time to dive into episodes. Are you game for that, Katie?
I am so game.
You've mentioned Gambit a couple times, so I think we should start there with Gambit parts 1 and 2, TNG season 7, episodes 4 and 5. Here we've got The sort of opening where we think that Picard is dead and Riker and Troy are trying to figure out what to do next. And they have this big dramatic scene, and it's the two-parter. And we have actually Picard being undercover as Galen. And we have the very wonderful Richard Lynch as Arctis Baran with very great on-point hair, I might add.
Oh,
in this episode. Yep. We've talked about the fact that as you watch the episode, the idea that it opened up your mind to the idea that there was this great big world out there. And it encouraged you to get off the couch and deal with sort of your adolescent depression, which I imagine was quite the thing to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at the episode now, are you able to interpret it as just a piece of Star Trek, or is it still very much tied into your feelings as a sort of a middle school girl?
Yeah, it's actually all the episodes of Star Trek I see, I think of them through a Star Trek lens, except for Gambit. Because for me, that's when I didn't know the characters' names. I didn't know Riker or Picard or Data, like a simple name like Data. I didn't know any of that. And so I was watching it purely for the people, not the characters that are behind those people. And no matter how much I try to watch it like a Star Trek episode, all I see is just the original, oh, look, that person's in trouble and those people are helping.
So you were introduced to him as Galen.
Yes, I was so confused because, I specifically remember I went to get an oil change the next day. I was riding out with my mom and I'm like, okay, so there's this guy named Pickard, I think.
John Luke Pickard.
There's this guy named Galen. Maybe there's I think maybe they're twins. No, they're not. No, it wasn't. I'm confused. And then I went back.
And your dad wasn't helping you with this as you watched the episode?
Oh my gosh. I got back home and my mom's like, you might want to, she's talking about Pickard. It's Picard, right? And my dad's like, yeah, it's Picard. You want to watch more episodes.
So it sounds like this episode really just holds a special place in your heart because of how you were introduced to it.
Oh, it definitely does.
And so would you say this is probably one of your most favorite TNG episodes? Or would you say it's one of your most favorite of all Star Trek?
I'd say it's probably one of my most favorite in all Star Trek, mainly because of that connection that I have to it. Stories we find people promote, like they love stories because they relate to them. And for me, that is my Star Trek story. So it's definitely one of my favorites.
One of the things I particularly love about the episode, it gets some flack in some quarters, but one of the things that I really love about it is this little Data and Worf scene in the second part where Data is basically offering Worf a tune-up on how to be an executive officer, and Worf is sort of like, I know what to do. And Data's like, no, this is how it will be. Or you can go back to tactical, right? And I was like, wow, he's laying down the law, Data is,
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that's some real command authority he's got there. And I thought it was a really good Data moment. And I actually really appreciated that. The other thing I really appreciate is the fact that Picard doesn't kill Baran, but Baran kills himself unknowingly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's another thing that really got me into Star Trek was a lot of times you see, shooting guns and death bombs and everything like that. Because I wasn't into sci-fi before it. And then I just see, there's this weird thing that happens and the dude's dead. Our hero has clean hands. Most of the time in Star Trek, they try to actually save as many people as they can. And that was just a refreshing breath of fresh air.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, I think a really great Star Trek message, though, is in the episode 2 about this whole stone of goal idea, right? Is that peace defeats war and death, which I think is very much a Star Trek message going right back to the original series in many cases, right? It's just a very positive message to it, which sometimes gets lost in sort of all the swashbuckling that happens in the episode, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there's a lot of Star Trek in there. I think it's just a fantastic episode. And it's never come up on the show before, so I was glad that you picked it.
Yeah, see, a lot of people, when they talk about Next Gen, it's the first, season 2, 3, 4, 5, all intermixed and stuff. You don't really hear Gambit thrown around. It's a 2-parter, so you'd think. But it's one of those episodes that, love it or hate it, it's there and it has good moments.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. So let's dive into a different show. Let's talk about Voyager. Let's talk about Worst Case Scenario, Season 3, Episode 25. And this is the one where Tuvok has a hollow training program where he's running through different scenarios if the Maquis tried to take over the ship. And of course, some of the other folks on board the ship get a hold of this and run through these scenarios really just for amusement and to see what's going on in there. And as all holodeck episodes do, it appears to me in Star Trek, something goes awry. And it turns out that the delightfully evil Seska has configured the holodeck to do her nasty bidding and cause some problems for our heroes.
I love it. This episode is my guilty pleasure. If I just want to have background noise on, I watch Worst Case Scenario.
Why is it a guilty pleasure? Why do you describe it that way?
Well, because when I talk about it with people who have seen Voyager and stuff, they think, it's a solid episode. You get Seska. Whatever. Like they have other big episodes like Year of Hell or something like that. I'm like, no. This is the episode that I love. Because not only do you get the cold open where you are literally sitting there like, what is happening? And you're just wondering. And then Tom, of course, walks in on B'Elanna on the holodeck program. But I'm just thinking, this is so great. It just throws you off from the beginning. And it's something that would happen on a starship. You find this mystery program about you and your crew, which, they've never talked about in Star Trek.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, let's give this a shot. So not only is it a unique story, it throws you off from the beginning, so you are already in on the action, but it brings back a massive character in Seska. And it does it beautifully. She's not back from the dead. She's not a zombie. She's not Tasha Yar's child. Like, no, none of that tropey stuff that you have to get in. This is pure hologram, pure chaos, and I love it.
Well, I noticed some very interesting parallels, little pun there, between Gambit and Worst Case Scenario, in that both begin with like these very strange cold opens where you're not in your normal scenario, right? Something is very off, like Picard being dead. In this particular case, we've got B'Elanna, on this weird kind of scenario where she's doing a mutiny and you're like, what is happening here? Dealing with the mutiny. But then at the end, you have another parallel in that the big bad ends up being killed by their own hands.
Ooh, that is a good parallel.
Right? And that Seska tries to use the phaser, but then she ends up killing herself, right? Yeah. Which reminded me, by the way, of the same scene in a movie called Surviving the Game. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
No.
It had Ice-T.
Really?
Yeah, so he plays like this sort of down on his luck blue-collar guy. And like Rutger Hauer and Gary Busey are like these rich jerks. And they hire him to go into the woods with them, basically as like to help fix stuff in their cabin, or I forget the exact scenario, but it's something like that. Except the whole point is when they're out at this cabin, they get up in the morning, they have this big breakfast, and then they tell Ice-T, by the way, we've lied to you. We're actually out here to hunt you. And we're going to finish eating breakfast, and then we're going to come kill you. So now is your head start. You better run. And that's what the movie is.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's awful. But at the end of the film, spoiler warning, it's the same thing where, the Rutger Hauer character escapes. Ice-T defeats all the bad guys, except for Rutger Hauer, who escapes. And at the end of the film, Rutger Hauer is going into hiding. And Ice-T shows up and is like, haha, I found you. And they have, one of those sort of, villain hero discussions that's, very tropey, right? And he has a gun that he leaves behind with Rutger Hauer and says, I'm just going to leave you be. And he walks off. And Rutger Hauer picks up the gun and tries to shoot him. But he had messed with the gun such that there was an obstruction in the barrel. And by trying to shoot Ice-T, the gun actually exploded and killed him,
Wow.
And that was like very much at the same time that these because it's 94, I think. So there was, I think this was like making the rounds in Hollywood, that this was like the, a way to resolve a lot of things. Yeah, we should all do this in our shows, It's very weird. But I noticed that parallel between Gambit and Worst Case Scenario. They sort of had the same kind of open and the same kind of ending.
Yeah.
But just a fantastic episode. But the other thing, too, as someone who I was in the Navy and went through all the military training and all that, I worked in the engine room. So I was a gold shirt in the TNG era, or a red shirt in the TOS era.
Go with gold. Go with gold.
And one of the things that I thought was absolutely true is that the holodeck would be used for training.
Oh,
like 90% of the times. Like it would not be a recreational tool.
Oh, yeah.
They'd be using it for training simulations, right? Just like they are in this episode. So I really like that component because I thought, man, that's exactly what would be happening. They'd totally be doing that.
Yeah. Oh, if I had a holodeck, I mean, college would be so much easier for meteorologists because I would have to go out on a 10-day field chase just to hope to see a storm. You can just pop one up on the holodeck, point out the clouds and the circulations. It'd be so much easier.
Let's move on to another episode. Let's talk about Trials and Tribulations, Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 6. If you don't know what this episode's about and you need me to remind you about it, I'm just going to pause right there and say you are probably listening to the wrong podcast.
Yeah.
You probably need to go out and sort of, reevaluate your commitment to the Star Trek fandom if you don't know about Trials and Tribulations from Deep Space Nine. So here we have the one with temporal investigations, the wonderful time cops, Luxley and Dulmer. Wonderful reference to X-Files there. What is it about this particular episode that made it come to the top of the list for you, Katie?
It's a different reason than most would say, because it is arguably one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek for the story, but also the filming aspect of it, combining original series and Deep Space Nine footage, just from being on television, that blew my mind. I was completely baffled. Like, wait, you'd have to make that into HD. You'd have to render all of that. How are they combining the scenes? How are they making this look so good? Like, I was just frustrated at how amazing it was and how it looked so simple, but I knew it wasn't. And so I've gone back and watched that episode over 20 times easily, which is a low number for some people. And I'm looking and thinking, wait, how did they mash up this shot? And I'm pausing it and thinking, and just by sheer repetition, I've memorized the episode and everything about it. And it's just fun and it's bright. You have the old colors.
Yes.
You have the reds, the oranges, the yellows, the blues, all popping.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's a masterpiece, a cinematography masterpiece.
And it was in the 90s. I mean, this wasn't today where we have, all the capabilities we have now with like the fully digital stuff. I mean, they were really doing some of this stuff with old school techniques and it was just amazing.
It's a borderline miracle.
Yeah.
But yeah, that whole is an enjoyable story. But then you have the real life filming aspect that just adds a whole new layer of depth to understanding it.
And as someone who works in TV production, like you have an extra level of appreciation of that, right? Those of us who were just watchers of the show were like, that's amazing. But you know what's sort of all the ins and outs of what goes into making something like that.
I'm thinking, how are you layering this? How are you adjusting the colors and the lighting? And I get a headache just thinking about it. That poor editing crew, they must have been locked away in their offices for months.
Oh, God, yeah. I can't imagine the sort of stuff they had to deal with in making that episode. But boy, oh boy.
Imagine pitching that episode to them being like, okay, guys, hear me out. It's going to be great. You're going to hate doing it, but it's going to be great.
So what's interesting is if you go back into some of the oral history, and there has been some reporting on this, so it's not a secret or anything that's new, but they were looking at a couple of episodes and they were deciding which ones they were going to do. And of course, they settled on the Trouble with Tribbles. But the other one they were looking at was going back to the planet in a piece of the action.
Really?
With the Chicago mob planet, like trying to figure out, like that was like the runner-up. Like if they didn't do the Tribble story, they were going to do that one.
Oh.
And I just keep thinking, man, not that there's anything wrong with Trials and Tribulations, right? And I'm not in any way saying they should have done that one instead, but I want that one too.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that planet and see what those people, what the Iosians are up to.
That would have been a hard decision.
I know, because at the end of the episode, Bones leaves his communicator down there, right? With all the technology in it, right? And so we never know what happened to those guys on that planet. So that's what I would have wanted to see, right? Is like sort of what goes on there. So it's not in any, I'm not comparing the two. I'm not saying any regrets or anything bad. I'm just saying I would want both.
Like this, when you brought it up, I was like, oh, I want that. And then I thought, oh my gosh, what if they hadn't have done Trials and Tribulations?
No.
It was like awe and horror at the same time.
We want them both. We want it all. We want it all. I want to know what the Iosians are up to, I have this list of things I consider my great Star Trek mysteries. And so on this list is like whatever happened to Commander Shelby from Best of Both Worlds, because I loved her. Right? Total firecracker.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever happened to Mistral from Carbon Creek?
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
In Enterprise? Like, where's that guy? Like, I want to know what happened to Mistral. This might be up there. Like, what are the Iosians up to? Like, I want to see the lower decks people go visit that planet and see what's going on there. I just have this feeling that, like, they're all like little gray aliens now, and sort of living like this incredibly spiritual, crazy, high-tech Star Trek life. Like, we look at Star Trek as like way off in the future and sort of this perfected society. Like maybe that's what the Iosians are doing now. Yeah, like our lower decks people are like, wow, this is amazing.
Oh my gosh, I love it. You should I'll bet you there's like a fan fiction folder somewhere of just what ifs. Like, what happened after this? What happened after that?
Well, it's funny because as we record this, I just released an episode. My guest on that particular episode of Trek Profiles, episode 40, is a fan fiction author.
Oh,
so
yes.
She's written all kinds of stuff. But in her particular case, what she wrote was a lot of missing scenes, like from episodes where like they should have had this scene and it wasn't in the episode, so I'm going to write it.
That's genius.
She did a lot of that. Yeah. So like, for instance, in Family, Best of Both Worlds Part 3, which I always call it, like there should have been a Picard Crusher scene to talk about the resolution of everything. So like she wrote that, right?
Oh.
I imagine that there's like a whole fanfic world out there of exactly this, like resolving these Star Trek mysteries. Like, did Mistral ever finish watching I Love Lucy and then move to Hollywood and become a scriptwriter? Or...
He went on set. he was a background extra.
He's a background extra in the final episode of I Love Lucy or something, right?
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take his picture, make it sepia, edit it into the background of an I Love Lucy episode, and just post it on some random Trek board and see.
As you should. Yes, send me that. And yes, I will retweet that. Which, by the way, is incredibly meta because Lucille Ball was critical in getting Star Trek on the air.
Yes!
So like, how could like the circle be even more complete, right? Than putting Mistral in an I Love Lucy episode.
Beautiful.
I mean, the mind just boggles at the self-referential aspect here.
It has to happen.
Let's talk about another Deep Space Nine episode. Let's talk about Let He Who Is Without Sin, Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 7. Worf and Jadzia go on vacation and bring along Quark for some very strange reason. So, which to me sounds like the most anti-vacation thing possible.
Just awful.
It's horrible. When you said that this is an episode you wanted to talk about, the only thing I could figure is that it had to somehow be related to the fact that there's a big weather angle here.
Yes.
Or is it related to the content of the episode? So help me out here, Katie, and tell me what's going on.
Well, the episode, of course, Let He Who Is Without Sin. I call it Let He Who Is Without Sun because you're tampering with the weather grid. Oh my gosh. When I was doing my first watch of Deep Space Nine, I was in college. So I was watching this and the episode comes up and I'm like, first of all, I want a weather grid because I would just have a revolving door of weather on top of my house. Blizzard one day, tornado the next. You could decorate for Halloween, like with different weather types because you could control the weather. So that instantly grabbed me. And then the aspect of you could use weather for arguably things that could be like terrorism or that could hurt people. Mm-hmm. And that's something, because meteorologists, we always joke, if I could control the weather, that's an aspect of it that I never thought of, ever. And it kind of just blew me away, blew me away, weather.
Yeah.
But, oh, the puns.
Okay, Dorothy.
And it was so incredible because you actually had to think, if a real world weather net were to develop, would people use that for good to prevent tornadoes and to help relieve drought or flooding? Or would it be a new type of war? Could people use it for nefarious purposes more than just making it rain on vacation? Could you actually control hurricanes or tornadoes and send all this out? And it made me think about that. And it also made me remember the Crusher with the ghost candle episode from TNG.
Oh, of
because
course.
They said the weather grid was acting up, so there's the lightning and stuff. I was like, oh, that's not real. This is a real weather episode in Star Trek.
So not a Sub Rosa fan, then I guess.
I hate Sub Rosa. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like that would be a great episode to watch if you were drunk. But just sitting sober, drinking a Sprite, thinking, what the heck?
Well, before we started recording, you'd mentioned that you were half of Macedonian extraction, half of Scottish extraction. So even like the whole Scotland thing didn't work for you in Sub Rosa.
Me. I was like, that's not the climatology of Scotland. What do you think you're doing? You can't do that.
I feel like I want to ask you to say, "Dinna light the candle."
Dinna like the candle. Dinna like the candle.
A+.
That freaking episode.
So I want to ask you a serious question, though. As a trained meteorologist, not that such things are within the short-term future, but can you see a path in the far-off future to actually developing something like a weather control grid? Does it strike you as even realistic, even in the far-off future?
I think it honestly could be. The weather, when it comes down to the bare bones, it's all revolving around the sun. The sun heats the earth. It heats it in different spots. Hot and cold mixed together, you get fronts and storms. Simple progression of storms. if you can control which spots see sunlight, which ones don't, you could feasibly manipulate the weather of a planet. And that's something that this episode made me think about, like not just a weather grid, but like actually putting out physical barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine, sometime in the future when we actually get to other planets or we want to try terraforming, maybe you could manipulate the weather on that planet by manipulating the sunlight and the heat. It would take an incredible amount of resources, but I think it could work.
Interesting.
And I want it to work because I want a pet tornado.
You want to be able to press the button, right? And just be like,
exactly.
here comes Hurricane Katie. Boop. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Off it goes. Here comes Tornado Katie. Boop.
Oh my gosh. I would just get like a weak, maybe EF1. I would tie myself down with a rope, make sure there's no debris anywhere. I would just run into the tornado and just float. Like, this is so much fun. And then, shut it down. But
I think you just wrote your very first holodeck program right there.
Oh, I absolutely have. It would just be a hurricane in that corner, tornado in that corner. We're going to have a dust storm moving in at noon.
Are you just going to let them fight it out? Or is it?
Exactly. Oh, a dust storm, blizzard, tornado. It'd be like Sharknado, but in the holodeck.
That sounds horrifying and delightful all at the same time.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
But I want to actually press you on this a little bit because I'm thinking back to some times in my youth, especially when I was more outside. I used to go to summer camp every summer as a kid, sleepaway camp.
Nice.
And one of the charming things about being outside and camping is sort of the unpredictability of the weather and how it influences like humans and how the unpredictability of it sometimes causes serendipitous things to happen. Like, I wonder if that would somehow detract from the experience of experiencing nature if you were on a planet with a weather net,
Oh, it absolutely would. And that's why I think I would love to have kind of a compromise, You have a little area of open prairie that you get tornadoes occasionally and just let it break out of the weather grid. And then say there's a hurricane developing in the Gulf. You pop on the weather grid and you can break it apart. Just destroy the things that would destroy and keep the natural variance of clouds and temperatures, being able to, say, if you live in the Midwest of the U.S., wake up to a snowstorm one day and then the next day you have to pull out the shorts because it's 72 degrees. Like that natural chaos I thrive on. I don't like the destruction that comes with the weather, but I do love experiencing it and the volatility and the craziness of it. So I think you'd have to have a happy medium where, okay, we'll let these things happen where they aren't hurting anyone. You can be a sightseer and experience them. But when it comes down to like a EF5 tornado hitting Oklahoma, no, we're going to dissipate that. It's just going to be rain. It's a little bit of playing God, but it'd be fun.
Well, I get the feeling in the Star Trek universe, though, they could probably build structures fairly easily that could withstand Cat 5 weather pretty easily. Yeah.
Exactly. And the way we're seeing it now, even with technology and architecture, is you're getting houses that are built with safe rooms, with cement rooms in the middle because of tornadoes. Mm-hmm. Why not figure out better design geometry, helping you build your roof so that it won't blow off? There's all these advancements that I think by the 23rd, 24th century, we would easily figure out.
It's the weather angle that really got you into this episode. That was the thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
And also you get to see Quark on vacation.
Running around with that Horgon.
Him with the Horgons. Oh my gosh. Oh, it was amazing. And I think it was also good because you got to see, Worf cut loose a little bit. And it's just a really fun episode from a ton of different angles. You can rewatch it 5 or 6 times and never get bored.
Well, and I do think there was a wonderful performance by the guest star. He was kind of he's a bad guy for sure, but Monty Markham as Pascal Fullerton, it was a nice performance. I thought the actor did a great job in it, but man, Worf was a little bit crazy in that episode. So while we're talking about weather and Star Trek, let me just ask you the question directly. When you think about sort of your passion for weather and science, and you think about Star Trek generally, what's like best weather in Star Trek?
Oh, man. Oh, that is such a good question. I have to say Ferenginar. Just making a miserable rain planet with storms all the time. It's
positively Glebenning out there.
Exactly. I would go there on vacation just to experience it. When they said that it's just a swampy, water-ridden planet, I thought, it's going to be raining a lot. I bet you get some good storms there. I want to go there. It was just a natural progression.
I remember, I want to say this was probably a couple of years ago, I got into a thing on Twitter, a good-natured discussion with a bunch of people, that somebody somewhere should do like a filk song, if you're familiar with the concept of filk.
No.
It's basically sci-fi folk singing.
Oh, I've heard some.
Right, yeah. And so someone should do like a remake of Africa Toto and do like, I want to see the rains on Ferenginar,
Oh my gosh.
I think that would just be glorious.
Oh my gosh.
Someone needs to do this, complete with like the in the total Toto style, but it's all about the rains on Ferenginar. I think it would be glorious.
So not only do I have to do Star Trek art now, I have to do Star Trek fan fiction and Star Trek songs. I want all of this.
I wasn't suggesting you should go do this.
You are giving me too many ideas. I'm going to do it.
All right. Well, then you know what? I will be your number one promoter and fan if you do. I will retweet the hell out of that for sure.
Billboard Top 100.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I might even, do a karaoke version of it.
Yeah.
So I'll just lay that down right here that I would totally do that. So worst weather in Star Trek.
Sub Rosa. With the funeral casket lightning.
Funeral casket lightning. Okay.
Dude, but
okay.
that's not even
All
how
right.
lightning works on Scotland. They don't have purple lightning.
Biggest weather mystery in Star Trek.
Oh, the episode with the Q creating the tornado that killed the parents of the baby Q girl. What's her name?
The actor was Olivia Dabo, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I remember the episode, yeah.
they're like, oh, my parents died in a tornado and it's the failure in the weather grid. I'm like, no, hold up just a second, because even if the weather grid failed, meteorologists would know. So what the heck happened there? And of course, later on, it's like, oh, it's the Q sort of thing. But also like, how did the meteorologist not give them warning? There's going to still be me and people like me out there in the future that are just going to be watching these skies, waiting for the weather net to slip up.
Absolutely. Someone's got to be clicking those buttons or watching the dials,
Exactly.
Someone's got to be sitting there, yeah, like the Federation Weather Directorate or whatever it is.
Oh, I would love to have that job.
So, Katie, I have to ask the question directly. What does Star Trek mean to you?
Oh, that is a really good question. It just means so much to me, because not only does it mean an escape from the world and its problems, which I've come to accept I can't solve all of them, and it allows you to get hope for the future, which everyone says. And, at some point it sounds cliche, but it's true, especially in modern times in 2020. You want hope that people will get along and you'll have advanced medical gear and you'll be able to get off planet and go and explore, and poverty won't be a thing, and all of these things that just make you smile and feel good knowing that maybe that could happen. And also to me, Star Trek means a family, which, oh my gosh, that just saying that sounded so cliche, but it's true, because we talked about conventions. You talk about the online community, even the actors themselves on their social media. Everyone interacts so well. And if you're having a bad day and you go on to, say, Twitter, and you just put, having a bad day, what episode of Star Trek would you recommend I watch? You're going to get so many people outpouring with love, like, hey, do you need to talk to someone? It's such a supportive community. And I love it. There's always someone to turn to if you're a fan of Star Trek.
Well, I've enjoyed our conversation, Katie, but I have to tell you that the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Fantastic.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared just for you by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. Are you ready, Katie?
I am absolutely ready.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Katie's responses.
Working. Simulation loaded and ready.
Question 1. Who is chasing you, the Borg or the Dominion?
Oh, the Dominion.
Question 2. Which is worse, San Francisco as seen in the early scenes of Star Trek IV, or the heavily polluted Tagra 4?
Tagra 4.
Question 3. Would you rather suffer through a pond far, or suffer through a temporary bout of the crazy space infection water from the Naked Time?
The Naked Time.
Question 4. Which ship would you like to see on a peaceful visit? A Klingon D7 or a classic Romulan TOS Bird of Prey?
Oh, D7.
And finally, question 5. Which place would you rather visit for science? Rurapente's icy vistas, or the sandy wastes of Ceti Alpha 5 after the orbital shift?
Repente.
M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing.
Katie, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Woohoo!
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Katie Nickolaou is awarded the title of Chief Atmospheric Scientist at the Federation Terraform Command.
So there you go.
Oh, that is an honor. Oh my gosh, I accept.
Katie, please tell people how they can get in touch with you or follow you on social medias if they want to continue the Star Trek conversation.
Absolutely. I always love talking with people, and the best way to get in touch with me is through Twitter, actually. You can follow my actual meteorology page at weather_Katie. But if you don't want to get the forecast for Sioux City, Iowa, you can still follow along with my weather shenanigans on my Twitter page, which is at forecast_fandom. Because I have a whole plethora of fandoms that I love, and I even do podcasts on my own that I'm trying to start up, and a lot of other nerdy things.
Fantastic. Well, we will have links to all of that over on the show notes page at TrekProfiles.com. So don't worry, listeners, if you didn't get that, just head over there and we'll have all that linked there for you so you can follow Katie's Instagram and everything else. Now, one of my listeners, there might be some that actually live in Sioux City. Where can they catch your meteorological forecasts?
Yeah, if you guys are anywhere in town, just check out KMEG 14 Siouxland News. I pop on every morning from 5 in the morning till 7, and it is a very early schedule.
So as we record this, it's early in the day on the West Coast, and it's the end of your workday.
Honestly, yes. I get up for work at 2 in the morning, so this is all natural energy, too. I don't drink coffee or Ractigino, so woohoo!
Wow, you are definitely a role model, Katie, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles, Katie.
Thanks so much for having me on. I have had so much fun.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your haiku poems of appreciation, your angry missives of malfeasance, or transcripts of your data gorn/fic to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it might be buried at the bottom of the Hubishian baths on Trill, never to be seen again. This week, I leave you with a quote from Captain Jean-Luc Picard, who in the episode Gambit said, quote, "You were right, Kalara. The resonator cannot be stopped by phasers and shields, but it can be defeated by peace." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
I want your best take rather than your hot take
I love
on any
it.
of this. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad you do editing, because last time I accidentally cut my foot on my chair and I was just bleeding for 30 minutes while on a podcast. I'm like, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Oh my God.
Oh, my life.
Yeah, you know what's really weird about podcasting, though, is that you go through all this work and then you hit the launch button or whatever it is that you hit, and then nothing happens.
Oh, no.
Right? Well, I mean, the episode I just released is like a 3-hour episode, right? And even if someone is like super eager to listen to it, right, they're not going to get to it for a couple days, and
Exactly.
and so like there's always this lag between when you launch it and when something happens, or when people have a comment. So it's like there's this moment of silence after you launch, and I'm sort of in that right now where I just get to relax. All the social medias have been published, and now I don't have to do anything.
Perfect.
I'm happy to do it. This is a labor of love. I don't charge for this. I don't have a Patreon.
Yeah.
I don't do ads. I don't do any of that.
Perfect.
Yeah, there's no
Just
way
do it
to
for fun.
Yeah, there's no way to give me money for the show. So it's all about just love of Star Trek,
I love
which
it.
I feel is very right in line with the show. So just do me a solid here and pronounce your last name so I get it right.
Yeah, it's Nickolaou. It's kind of like someone says Nick and allow, or if someone throws a nickel at your head, you say ow. So Nickolaou, it works.
I get the feeling you've had to say that more than once or twice.
Many times.
Yeah. Now, is that Greek?
It is, yeah. Well, it's Macedonian, but we just go with Greek because no one knows where Macedonia is. And
there's a whole scrap about Macedonia in Greece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can imagine how that goes over with the family. I'm half Macedonian, half Scottish. So
oh goodness, that's quite a combination.
Yes, I'm a full-hearted, tough-headed, everything, and a very curly hair, which I have to straighten every day for work.
Oh, wow. Well, but you can go for whatever look works for you, right?
Exactly. When I'm chasing tornadoes, no one cares.
No one's going to care. No one's going to care. But I definitely want to talk about that on the show.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to talk about that. I was on a couple of things. I mean, listeners to my show know that I was on Let's Make a Deal, and
hey!
they had a special Star Trek themed episode of Let's Make a Deal, which you can find on YouTube, and it was, I want to say 7 months, something like that, between the recording date and when it went on the air. And yeah, I think that's maybe September to February. So 6 months. Yeah, something like that. And I told no one anything.
Good on you.
And I got called. I was up there with Wayne Brady, and yeah,
gosh.
I didn't even tell my wife.
Oh my God.
I would just tell people I attended a taping. They're like, "Oh, did you get called?" I was like, "You should watch it. It'll be on in February."
There you go. Well, even now with our TV shows, I watch Wheel of Fortune, and I watch what one is Drew Carey on?
Price is Right.
Price is Right. How did I forget that? But yeah, I watched The Price is Right, and I'm thinking, we've been in quarantine for how many months, and these are still new episodes. How long do they record these for?
A long time.
Oh, that'd be awful. I don't think I could keep that secret.
No, but I will say this. One of the things that they told us, and this was true, is that no matter how much you win, whether it's $100 or the Showcase Showdown or whatever it is, they're not going to give you any money until at least 30 days after the show airs. So even if you wait for, even if they hold on to that episode for a year, you're not going to get the money till after the show airs. And they tell you that if they find out you talked or you posted or you social media'd or you Twittered and, you spoiled in any way, they're not going to give you any, you're not going to get the money.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah. So you've got that hanging over your head too, which
That's
was
a
true.
little incentive.
I got a little bit of something, and, while you get the prizes they give everybody, like I think the thing I went to, everybody got a Roku box and a CBS All Access gift card. So everybody got that. That wasn't if you attended the taping, you got that. So you walked out with that. But the other thing was the money that you get, which even I got a little something. They don't send it until afterwards. Yeah.
Wow.
So you got that to look forward to, Katie, if you get selected.
Great.
But I'm sure, having come out as a Star Trek fan, you know that the Star Trek fandom will be behind you if you end up on the show.
And the perk is they're both CBS shows, so
they are. You can cross promote. Like when they ask you for a comfort item, you can bring your Star Trek Delta or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
I got my Delta shield. I got Badgie.
As long as he doesn't try to teach you a lesson, you'll be all right. Absolutely. And, it's funny because we had like a very similar sort of scenario in real life, which this is going to require a moment of explanation. So in the engine room on a submarine, there's a room on a submarine in particular, not on surface ships, called the maneuvering room. And that's basically like the bridge for engineering. And so you have the one officer who's in the engine room who doesn't touch anything. He sits behind the desk and has the procedure out. And you have 3 guys, and I was one of those 3 guys. And we would have these panels in front of us, and one of them was the throttleman, one of them was the nuclear reactor operator, and the other one was the electrical operator. And what happened was that's where everything happened in the engine room, was in this little room right here. And when you're in training, or if they wanted to run simulations, what would happen is there would be a safety observer standing behind you because you don't have a training environment. You're in the real room, right? So you'd have a safety observer. Then you'd have a training guy who would come in and put a suction cup with a dial on it over the real panel. And he'd and so you'd be like, oh, it looks like that indicator is moving because there's a guy standing right next to you moving it. I mean, it was so stupid.
That is
right?
so Star Trek.
But it's like, it was so stupid, right? But then we went to this training facility where they had a fake maneuvering room that wasn't actually hooked up to a reactor plant. It was just the 3 panels, right? And so you're standing there, and like the guys that were controlling it, they could make any indication change at any time, and you didn't see a guy. Like you didn't know what was going on. So you're sitting there like at red alert the whole time, and you're like looking at the, like in the real maneuvering room, you're not at that level of alert, right? Yeah. But when you're training, you're like, something's going to happen. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to, and like you're looking at all the things, like you're waiting, It's like,
that would be awful.
But you just know that they would be doing that in the holodeck all the time. They'd have a simulated bridge, and they'd be doing, all kinds of stuff you couldn't do like in the real bridge because you actually have to operate the ship.
Exactly.
So that's why I never, like, all the times they would just walk into the holodecks and no one would be in there. I was like, that would never be the case.
No way.
Those things would always be booked. But
that would be training all the time.
Yeah. There'd be people doing recreational stuff too, but they'd be doing training simulations in there all the time. I'm totally convinced of that. Yeah. I always wanted like a more fun way to end the episodes, so I came up with that. We've been doing it since the first episode. So.
Good on you. That is an ingenious workaround.
So, you know what? Though, I will say it is the part of writing each episode that gives me the most pleasure. Yeah, because it's perverse and I mean that in the most like G-rated sense.
Oh yeah.
But it's the most perverse like Star Trek thing, right? It's to sit there and come up with these horrible choices, right?
I love it.
Do you want to be on Earth in San Francisco and in the early scenes of Star Trek 4? Or do you want to be on this heavily polluted planet?
Perfect. Yeah, I'll pop it into the drive. It takes a little bit to upload because my internet, Iowa internet, not that great.
Yeah, I know. Believe it or not, my company has a very large facility in Urbandale.
Really?
So I have flown into Des Moines and driven out to Urbandale many a times. Yes. It's very weird because we have this very corporate office building, and right across the street is a 100% legit dairy farm. And so you're driving in your business casual, you got your little briefcase and you got your work key card and, all your cool little corporate stuff. And meanwhile, there's across the street, it's moo cows. I mean, and there's like this office park and you're just like, what is that guy? Like that guy is right in the middle of this office park with his dairy farm. I love it.
This is here for tax evasion purposes, isn't it?
No, I am 100% sure that farm was there and like the office park came to envelop his property, and he's like, to hell with you all.
Yeah, I'm staying here. Doing it.
I'm staying here with my cows. I was here first, So I just have this kind of image I have no idea if this is true, but I just sort of have this image in my head of like this ornery sort of Iowa farm guy,
Totally. I was born here. I'm going to die here. My cows are too.
Yeah, because you can see people outside, like, having their smokes because, you can't smoke inside. So they're outside having their smoke and, like, 30 yards away are the cows.
That's amazing.
So you're getting, like, the full-on, like, rural Iowa experience in your office park.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then one day when I was out there, they actually had a tornado warning.
Really?
When I was out there, yeah, it was for a work thing. And I was like, what do we do? Where do we go?
You go outside and you look.
Well, I'll tell you my funniest weather-related story. So you, of all people, will appreciate this. This was maybe 5 years ago. My best friend and I, our wives and kids, we decided to do a cross-country RV trip.
Ooh.
So we rented a 36-foot RV, and we drove it. It was like a 2-week trip. So we drove all the way from Vegas, which is where I am, all the way to South Dakota, and then down into Nebraska, into the Nebraska Panhandle, and into the Southwest, into New Mexico, and back. I mean, it was we went all the way up into Idaho on the way out. I mean, it was a long trip. So we had spent the day at Mount Rushmore, and we were supposed to go that night to this working farm, with this working like dude ranch / farm that was in the Nebraska Panhandle. And it was a real place. Like, this is not a tourist thing. It was a real working place, but they rented out like this couple of facilities they had to RVers and to people with kids. And the kids could do these like panning for gold activities. You ate the camp dinner, like with the guys working there. And I thought the kids, because they were little kids at the time, I'm like, they're going to love this. So for whatever reason, we'd gotten a late start. And so we were desperate to get to the Dude Ranch in time for the dinner and show.
Yeah.
Which was in the Nebraska Panhandle. And it turned out we had gone the wrong way. And we'd gone the right direction, but it had taken us to a road which was not passable in an RV. And so when we called them up, this is the risks of using your navigation app for some of these places out west, because it was a real route, but you could not go this way in an RV. And the people were like, yeah, you can't go that way in anything bigger than a four-wheeler. You have to drive around this national park to get to where we are. And I was like, oh, okay, but we were going to get there too late. And this was like the one thing I totally wanted to do on the trip, right? So we're driving that, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the weather, and like the sky turned a really weird shade of purple. And I was like, that is not a good sign. I was like, this is not good. And so I'm a pilot. So I have some weather training, not obviously to where you are, but I had enough to know that I'm looking at the shapes of the clouds, and I'm looking at like, we're in the middle of this giant flat area. And I was like, this is not good. I was like, we have to get off the road. We have to get off the road now. And the wives were like, well, maybe we can. I was like, we need to get off the road now. So you will find a place for us to stay. Take out your phone and you will find a place. You will handle the navigation. Like, I was like, that's it. Like, all right, this is Captain Picard, and I'm assuming commander of the fleet. It was one of those moments, because I was like, this does not look good. And sure enough, we got a tornado warning, right? And I was like, oh, we have got to get out of here. And in an RV, that is like the worst possible place to be.
Yeah. Wide open fields, RVs.
No, and we were not near civilization. So it was like, it was bad. But we ended up pulling into some little tiny town somewhere and staying in like this little tiny motel and had dinner and a Sizzler. And it all worked out okay in the end. But we never got to go to the Dude Ranch, which I still regret. So we're going back there one of these days.
Exactly.
Anyway,
yeah, something to look forward to.
That's my one weather story I'll share with you.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it.